A calm sea is an illusion. There is always the unexpected lurking just below the surface. And when chaos erupts, some can swim to the shore, while others will sink into the abyss. Your host, Chris Kane, is an insurance adjuster and also an agent licensed in multiple states. He spent over 30 years helping people with claims, and this podcast is to help business owners, supervisors, and employees to be prepared before and after a work comp injury occurs. Batten down the hatches and join us as we navigate the sea of confusion.
Hello, this is Chris Kane and Lauren Kane, and we're doing our question and answer series. Lauren, what kind of questions do you have for us today?
All right. Hi, everyone. Some employees do not want to go to a panel doctor because they think a panel doctor only helps the company. Therefore, employees want to see their own doctor. Is this true, and who pays for what?
I hear this more often than not. I can tell you in over 25 years of handling workers' comp cases, I've never had a doctor that the employer control. And doctors are there for really one or two things. The first is to take care of the patient. The second is to make sure that they make money. They want to make sure that they don't have large accounts receivables and fighting for insurance dollars. So to say that a panel doctor is, in the hands of the employer is not 100% correct. Now, there is some merit to a doctor that does go on panel in that some of the doctors are trained for occupational injuries and understand the work comp system and are able to apply the laws to the injuries. In other words, did the injury arise out or reasonably occur at the employer? So to say that they're completely under the hands of the insurance company or the employer is not necessarily true. I think with providing multiple doctors, it does give credence to the employee to give them a choice, where in some states they don't even have a choice at all. Now, as far as what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question is this true, and who pays for what?
Okay. The paying for workers' comp goes back to the Great Compromise. Prior to workers' comp, basically an employee would have to show that their employer was liable for their injuries. In other words, the employer did something wrong. They set up something wrong or created a problem that injured an employee. This was difficult to do. The employee was faced with paying all the medical bills themselves, and in the cases where it did go to court and the employee won, it was also resulted in larger settlements, larger payouts. The Great Compromise on this basically states that the employer will pay for the medical treatment, will pay for the lost wages, regardless of who's at fault. So it's a no-fault type coverage. And in return, the employee does not get the large settlements. In other words, the amount that is paid is already set out in the statute.
All right. Can you change doctors within the panel if you don't like them, or can you ask for a second opinion? And what do you do if you don't agree with their diagnosis?
Okay. Changes in the panel vary by state to state. We've got some states that don't have panels at all. We have states that do provide panels in certain cases. But in most workers' comp systems, there's always a level of control. Now, to make a change, usually the first and best way to do it is for the employer to communicate with the insurance carrier, or the employee to communicate with the insurance carrier and the employer and go through and see what the problems are with the current doctor. And if they can agree to another doctor that's mutually agreeable to both parties, that's the way to do it, and do it by agreement. Now, if we get in a situation where the insurance carrier or the employer does not want to change doctors, it varies by state. But In most states, there is a mechanism for either a one-time panel change or a second opinion option. The second opinion option, I think, is pretty much available in all the states when a surgery is involved or recommended.
What do you do if you don't agree with their diagnosis?
If you don't agree with their diagnosis, the best course of action is for the employee to discuss with the employer. Now, the employee can always go and get an independent medical evaluation on their own, but again, it varies by state and whether it's admissible or not. But the employee does this at their own cost, so they would pay for any diagnostic and the doctor's visit.
How often should you update your panel of physicians?
In states where you have panels, you really need to update them quarterly. There's been so many changes with doctors, especially since the pandemic. Doctors move around, they go to different, groups, or they're actually bought out by larger groups or hospitals. So making the effort to go over and review it quarterly is best. What happens most of the time is not even discussed until the yearly and when the work comp is renewed. However, that leaves a lot of time for errors to occur. And the last thing you want to do is have a problem with a panel when you're having an emergency situation or a claim.
So for the panel, how many doctors should be on said panel?
Okay. That varies by state. In Tennessee and Alabama, where you have panels in certain situations, it's usually a minimum of 3 doctors. Or in some states, they specify 3 doctors in Alabama for a panel. But it's a minimum of 3 doctors, which means you could actually give more doctors if you want to. In Georgia, the panel, has certain requirements. There can be only 2 occupational med doctors on a panel. There needs to be a minority doctor. And then you need to have doctors to cover different injury areas, ideally eye injuries, orthopedics for shoulders, orthopedics for back, etc. But there's usually a minimum number of doctors. There's usually not a maximum number of doctors. And in states that require MCOs like Kentucky, which is a managed care organization, you can have as many doctors that are in the MCO, but that gets into a whole different level outside of the panel. But those type of situations exist. Again, it varies by state.
Just for a definition-wise, what is an MCO?
MCO is a managed care organization. What it is usually a group that puts together a group of doctors that meet certain qualifications and participate, which means they either pay to be in this organization in return for patients.
All right. What is the best way to explain to employees how a panel of physicians work?
The best way to do this is in the hiring practice. When you're going through all the training and onboarding, it's best to have a section in your process to explain the workers' compensation. It is a benefit for the employees, so I would go along with any of the other benefits. But explain that you have a posted panel, have a copy of that panel in their hiring packet, and have them sign that panel or sign who they need to go to in case of an emergency. These all need to be posted somewhere where the employees can see on a regular basis, but the best way is to explain to them one-on-one when they are hired. Now, obviously, you may have employees with long tenure. It's always good to have a company meeting at least once a year when you do your insurance renewals to explain the cost and they're associated with having the workers' comp program, and to explain where the panels are, where the doctors are, and what to do in case of an emergency.
Ooh. All right. If I'm hurt and I know where the panel is posted, can I go to the doctor posted by myself if I can't get a hold of anyone at the office to report the injury to?
Yes, that's the main reason why it's posted. So if they can't get in touch with anybody, they know where the doctors are, they know what to do. And it goes back to explaining to them in the pre-hire and yearly meetings what happens if that's there. A good scenario is, you may have a couple of employees that are coming in and working on a weekend. Let's just say they're doing some work in the back and one of them has, let's just say, sprains an ankle. They go and they pull the panel and then they go in and go to the doctor and take the panel with them. That way they can get in. Usually it's going to be an emergency room or an urgent care facility, but at least they got the information so they can start the process. If you've ever been to a doctor's office or to the emergency room, it's kind of funny in a way, but it is. It isn't, but every time you go, the first thing they're going to ask you is, number one, do you have insurance? They'll want your insurance card. Or two, did the injury happen at work? Because hospitals and doctors are keenly aware of the processes they have to go through for workers' comp.
Say if you do not have a panel and someone gets hurt, can they quickly create a panel on the spot, or are they just, screwed?
Again, that's a state-by-state question. In Tennessee, yes, you could create a panel on the spot because the panel doesn't have to be posted. In Georgia, no. The panel needed to be posted prior to the injury. It needed to be the employee needed to be aware of the posting and where to look for the posting. So it varies by state. Obviously, you always want to have it done beforehand because this is the mechanism as part of the work comp to control your biggest cost in workers' comp. Your biggest cost, if you run any loss run out there, the biggest cost is going to be your medical costs. Why? Because medical costs have gone up significantly every year. Now, when I started, medical costs weren't the biggest expense. It was the indemnity costs. Everybody was worried about, lost time, things of those natures. But that quickly changed as, hospitals and doctors and medical costs quickly inflated.
What do you do when an employee has a small accident, say they fell over and they hit their hip or something, and they say that they're okay, but then later goes to see their own doctor?
First thing is you document it, that they've refused treatment. Document that they know where to go and who to report to should they have a problem in the future. If an employee goes to their doctor on their own, they basically assume the risk of paying for that doctor. Now, it'll vary, but in most cases, those bills are not the responsibility of the employer. So it's one of those, if you've been told and notified and you can document that you've notified the employee, that cost is going to be on the employee.
How long does an employee have to turn in a work comp claim?
In most states, it's 30 days to report. Again, the statute in Tennessee is a year. The statute in Georgia is 2 years. It varies, obviously, state by state. But in practicality, cases that aren't reported within 24, 48 hours usually end up having some sort of problem. Now, again, with people working remotely and those type issues do create some challenges and some delays. But in reality, most everyone, insurance carriers, employers, want the claims reported within 2 or 3 days of them happening. And if they are a serious case, obviously you have timetables with OSHA if it's a loss of an eye, death claim, etc., that you have to comply and report to OSHA as well that are penalized. But again, it varies by state to state on the time frame on when they have to be reported.
All right. Is there a specific place to post a panel?
There is. It used to be where the employees clock in and clock out. A lot of now with the computers, people are clocking in on their computer. You see fast food places where they actually clock in on the register themselves. So that's got to be sort of antiquated. The best place is to post it somewhere visible inside the organization. And again, also providing it to them through updates, emails, updates to the employee handbook. Those are ways to show that it's posted as well. But it does need to be someplace where if something happens, somebody could reasonably get to it. Usually next to a first aid station is always a good place to have it as well, because basically is also there as an emergency protocol. Somebody gets cut or seriously injured, they can go. It may not be the panel. It may be just the notice to who to contact or who's the insurance company or what's the policy number. Those things need to be posted visibly where they can be accessed by all the employees.
Can you put it in a pretty frame?
You can put it in a pretty frame as long as you can read it. And you can't put it in a frame and put one of those tinted covers on it where you can't read it. But as long as you can read it, you can put lights on it if you want to. Put a little flashing thing around it if you want to. But as long as you're able to read it, you can put it in a frame. And granted, I think that does put a little air of class to it and makes it stand out and be important. But as long as it's visible is the main requirement.
All right. If the employees do not work in the office, should I give them a paper copy when they are hired, or does an email work? Or
I think both. I mean, granted, most of these days people, want to see it digitally. I think digitally is fine. I think that really shows a receipt that they've got it. But also providing it to them with paper and having a signature is also a great way as well, especially in remote areas. The other thing with remote areas too, and most carriers and employers are doing, is they actually have them take a picture of the area where they're working. I mean, people work at home. They usually got a place in a bedroom or an office or maybe in the living room area, and they make them take a picture, but they also make them take a picture showing that the panel is posted in their work area. So that way is another way to document that they've got the panel, which I think is, in this day and age, is key.
Really important information. What if an employee gets hurt over the weekend and can't get a hold of anybody at the office to report it?
That's another reason for having the posted panel and posted who to contact in case of an emergency. If they're by themselves, I mean, obviously, if they're hurt significantly and need to call an ambulance or 911, that's fine. But there needs to be protocols. If an employee gets hurt and they're at the place of work and they were doing what they were supposed to at work, in other words, rising out of and in the scope of their employment, then they can go to get medical treatment, and the employer should pick up those costs. Now, once they're stabilized or once everybody gets back in the office, then the employer has the duty to get everything together and get it back on track. But the one thing that you don't want to do is discourage somebody from getting medical treatment. I think it's very important if somebody's hurt or thinks they're hurt that they do get seen. I'd rather see somebody pay a couple of $100,000 just to find out that they're okay than to ignore it or think they can't go to the doctor and it end up being something that costs tens of thousands of dollars or could be fatal or any number of outcomes. So I think you're always better to err on the side of caution.
So how exactly does the employee get treatment then?
Well, if it's just I hate to say routine, but if it's an injury, let's just say it's a burn at work. Somebody is working on a piece of equipment that's hot. they inadvertently get touched by it, they have a burn. It's obviously, second and third degree burn. You go through the process. They go to the person that's on the where to go. That's part of the panel process. Who do you go to in the company? They go, they get their panel. The HR personnel should have the instructions to go with them to the doctor. Most of the time you want somebody to go with them. They go to the doctor. They have all the insurance information there. Hopefully the doctor's office have set up protocols, which would happen when you set up the panel. And then the process goes from there. When people are prepared and have this information together, the process works so much smoother. It's when you have a problem with the doctor, or you have a doctor that's not available, or you don't have the paperwork and everybody's scrounging trying to find it, that's where it gets to be a problem. Because not only you got somebody hurt, now you got somebody that's hurt and waiting and wondering what's going on.
Yeah, we don't like to wait.
No, not in this day and age. We're instant access.
All right. Basically, what I'm hearing is that there's different reports to different types of people. So what is the difference between reporting an injury to like an employee, a coworker, a supervisor, the HR person, or the boss?
Really, there's no difference. I mean, everybody's got to go through the same protocol. I mean, if you're going hurt, you go through the panel, or if you're in a state where it directs medical, the HR department will tell the CEO where they need to go. I mean, it's pretty standard from the CEO to the janitor to follow those rules. Most of the time, you're not going to usually see a CEO do that, but for a number of reasons, a lot of times they exclude themselves from the workers' comp for premium issues. But even higher level management, the HR director, all follow the same rules. Because if something goes haywire or there's a conflict, they all go to the same judge, you all go through the same system, you all follow the same statutes.
Swim together, save each other.
Yes.
Okay. If all my employees are part-time, do I still need to buy workers' compensation on them?
Yes. It varies by state, but the number of employees, whether part-time, full-time, determines whether you're required to have workers' comp insurance. Now, that being said, even if you got less than the minimum, just say you got 2 or 3 people, it's always good practice to have workers' comp insurance. Workers' comp insurance, while it's an expense, it is based on payrolls. So obviously, a company that has 1 or 2 people has less payroll than one that has 1,000 people. So, and it's also class codes as well. But again, why would you not want to protect yourself by having workers' comp insurance? And plus, when you're a small company like that and doing work, let's just say as a subcontractor, which the laws are different in the contracting world, but let's just say you're a service provider with, a small number of employees. Most of your bigger companies are going to require you to have workers' comp. So it's always good practice to have it. Last thing you want is to have a claim and you not have the insurance or funds to pay for a claim that you owe. Because regardless if you have workers' comp or not, if you read the statute, it says the employer. It never says the insurance company. The responsibility is the employer, not the insurance company, not anybody else. So that's always something business owners really need to keep in mind.
That is all of our questions that we have in this set. Is there any words you want to close out with?
No, if you have any questions or there's something that you would like that you heard on our questions today, always follow up with us. We're happy to be a resource to you and give you the information you need.
All right.
Thank you for your support of this podcast. For additional information, please visit our website, workcompchaos.com. All links available in the description below. Until next time, fair winds and following seas.